All right, hey guys, welcome back. So what I got here is an XGSF 3000. Never heard of it, but it's a 3000 watt inverter generator and has carburetor issues and probably some other issues. This to me looked a lot like the Honeywell inverter generators, and I double checked. It is definitely made by the same company in China. This one is called a Fugi Micro. It's the name of the company, and parts seem to be very difficult to find for it. Also Googled on it a little bit. It seems to be a more popular unit overseas. I saw a few YouTube videos actually in Australia to a model similar to this. Actually, it was a lot nicer, a little more wattage, electric start, remote start, digital display. So I think it's a pretty solid unit, you know, just based on some of the models they have and the fact that Honeywell sold them under the 2000i line for a while. So it's probably worth fixing. I was told it will start on choke. Haven't been able to get it to start, but I would like to try to see, you know, if it makes power before continuing. Aside from the carb issue, the foot broke off. Not a big deal, but it's just a kind of a vibration insulator. And also the recoil isn't great. I was told the cord previously broke. They put a new cord on. It looks like a piece of rope, and it's fraying. And let me just pull it out here. So it seemed a little short to me. When I was trying to start it, I kept kind of maxing it out when pulling out, and I'm afraid, you know, the recoil is going to break if I keep doing that. Also, when it goes back in, it's pretty slow to return, so I don't think they wound the recoil up enough when they put that new rope on. So, you know, assuming I can get it to start and make power, you know, I'll dig into the recoil next and straighten that out and anything else that it needs. So let me put you down. I'm gonna try to start this again and see if it does anything. All right, choke's on. All right, it's set to run. A lot of compression. I think that's good. Now I did it. So I can see why that rope is frayed. It's actually kind of cut a path into this plastic guard, and it got stuck in there. So I'm going to leave this off for now. so not a very good color. So probably gonna have to rebuild it. All right, so this thing does not start. The fuel that came out of the carburetor was very dark in color. It smelled and it kind of had that varnishy color, so I'm guessing the main jet is probably completely clogged. This setup's a little different than most. Usually I pull the airbox off and then I can slide the carburetor off. For this, that will not work. Even if I open the case up, the fuel tank's in the way. Not sure it's worth the effort, although I probably do have to open the case at some point. But for now, I just want to see if this thing runs before I go all out. So I think all I need to do is remove these screws from the air intake that bolt onto the engine. And I believe this whole assembly with the air intake, the carburetor, and the air box should come out as one unit. And then I just have to disconnect the primer hose, fuel line, and then on the top of the carb, there's no linkage. This is computer controlled, but there is a servo. So I'll have to just remove the wires connecting that up, and hopefully it comes out. But before I do that, I did check for spark, and I do have spark. Let me show you. That looks good. It actually doesn't look bad. I mean, a little chunky on the bottom. This is the pilot jet. That might be clogged. Yeah. Not clogged. So what I find works best for this is just a a wire from a wire brush. It's an interesting design, but it looks like this just comes off. So when it's installed, you can only access the filter from here, so you can just slide it in and out sideways. All right, it's all clean. Time to reassemble. Okay, main jet is snugged up. Now we'll put the float and needle in. And the pin. Wrong size. Okay. And now the pilot jet, which was definitely clogged, so this is probably why it didn't run. At least I hope. And this holds the pilot jet in. It's also the throttle speed at idle. But since generators don't really idle, this doesn't matter too much. As long as you don't crank it in so far that the generator can't slow down. Good. Done. Yeah, so this is kind of an orangey, brownish, red color. This is the gas. It's all this color. Doesn't smell horrible, but that is not a normal color for gas. It almost looks like Kool-Aid, but definitely not Kool-Aid. So I'm gonna drain the rest of this out and put some fresh gas in. All right, all back together more or less. I haven't put the covers on yet. Haven't tried starting it yet. So let me see what this thing can do. See if I can do this. Yay! Oh, that was a pain to get off. Okay, so it's all back together. You know, I haven't obviously screwed the clamshell tight, but let's see if it starts now. I did fill the tank all the way and then used the manual pump. Okay, so in case you didn't notice, this thing really kicked my butt last night. So I started with the usual stuff. So it's getting air, it's definitely getting fuel, and it's definitely getting spark. And I confirmed the fuel pump is working. You know, the bowl was filling up with fuel. So there's something else going on with this generator. So the symptoms it's showing are A, not starting, B, recoil, very hard to pull, which tells me the compression release is not functioning or the valves are out of adjustment. And lastly, I did get it to kick a few times and it ripped the rope right out of my hand, hurting my wrist and muscles pretty badly. It did that 2 or 3 times. So potentially I was misreading that. You know, if the compression release isn't functioning, maybe it was just a hard, you know, compression cycle that ripped it out, but I think it popped and pulled it backwards. I mean, it really hurt. And if that's the case, then there might be a flywheel key issue. Tonight, the main focus is going to be just getting the covers completely off of this and get the gas tank out, get the gas out of the gas tank, basically just strip it down to the engine and take the plastics off the engine to expose the valve cover. And we're going to have to take the valve cover off and check the clearances and see what's going on in there. And I'm going to take that recoil off again and take a look at the key on the shaft. Okay, sorry about that. So for some reason the camera stopped recording, but I'm basically back to where I was yesterday. I got both sides of the plastic off. Actually the back side to you is still connected via the wires. So I'm just going to mark those and then disconnect them. I'm not sure exactly where the valves are, but I believe they're probably right in this area. So carburetor will come off and spark plug is going to come out. Alright, so I've got it at top dead center. Seems to be a mark and a little dot indicating that right there. So now I'm going to check the clearance. Yeah, not good. This flywheel is damaged, which is why it derailed when winding up. I don't know if you can see, but right there you can see the side of the rope. Right there you can't. So I will need a new one of these. Okay, so my battery's almost dead and I'm almost out of memory, so I'm gonna make this quick. The valves are tight. Not a lot tight, but definitely tight. I don't think there was any gap. And if anything, I was guessing they'd be loose. So now that I've adjusted them, they're actually a little too loose right now. I don't even know what the spec is supposed to be, but I was trying for 8 and 5, and they're a little bit more than that. So I might try adjusting them again, but it's so easy to crank in now. Yeah, I put the spark plug back in to get compression. That is great. I could not do that before. All right, so I've gone down deeper here in the rabbit hole. I pulled the tin off the engine, wanted to get a better look at the magneto and the magnets and try to figure out the timing. Originally I was thinking that the shear key could be sheared, and I figured if I looked at the magnets, I could figure out if the timing was off. And it's a little, not quite what I was expecting to see. There's 3 what appears to be magnets, but the middle one is definitely a strong magnet. You can see even when I put the screwdriver down near the bottom here, it wants to go up. So I do feel a magnetic field here, but I think it's just this one. And it has a very weak magnetic property. I don't think it's enough to cause any kind of a spark. And this one, same thing. I mean, it's really not magnetic, but slightly. And the closer I get to the big magnet, the more magnetic it gets. So that's the one that makes the spark. And my understanding is that you kind of need the magnet to be influencing both sides of the coil to build up a charge. And then as soon as it goes by, which is right about there, the field will collapse, sending high voltage through to the spark plug. And if I look at the timing here on the back, you can see I'm just right around top dead center. So timing's good. I'm not going to touch it. Okay, so I'm ready to start putting this thing back together. And one thing I noticed actually while doing that was an issue potentially with the spark plug boot. When I initially unplugged it, I noticed the spark plug looked like that. It's kind of a threaded top, which I know some brands you can unscrew them, and I always wondered why, because I never really never worked on anything that used one like this. Usually it's just the normal ones that kind of clip on. So, fine. I put it back in, and then I think I removed it later. Before I broke the rope, I removed it probably 10 minutes before. When I did that, it didn't look like that. It actually had a brass piece over it, like threaded onto it. So I'm like, okay, great. I just broke something inside the boot. Turns out I didn't break something, but I probably did lose something. Let me show you. This brass fitting in here kind of unscrews a lot like a main jet does in a carburetor. And inside it is the piece I'm talking about. So the spark plug just pushes in, and I think it's supposed to be strong enough so when you pull the spark plug out, it just comes out. And the threads actually serve just as like friction to keep it in. Anyway, when I pulled it out, this whole thing came out, and I thought I noticed some other pieces of metal kind of rolled out of there, and I could never find them. At the time the tins were on, and I think it rolled out down toward the inverter area. So I couldn't find it in the inverter, I couldn't find it in the case, You know, I was checking around the magneto, the armature. Did it fall down the spark plug hole? Can't find it, so didn't see it long enough to know what it was. Anyway, when I was messing around with it later, something did fall out of that hole behind the brass fitting. And I have no idea what this is. So if any of you guys know, please tell me. But I did test it, and it has a high resistance. It's probably around 4,000, maybe a little over 4,000 ohms. And as far as I can tell, this goes in the boot, and then you screw this brass fitting on top. And the only reason I even noticed this was because the spark was it was there, but it wasn't super strong, and I thought it was stronger when I first tested it. So anyway, I took the boot with all this screwed in place and gave it a shake, and I could just hear this thing kind of rattling back and forth like it was loose. So I said, okay, something did fall out. It was kind of like this. There must have been two of them in there, and then this brass fitting just held it all tight. So after looking for too long, I decided I don't know what it is, but I wanted to try to fill that gap. So I just found a screw, cut it to size, and put them together, and then screwed it back in. Now when I shake it, I don't hear anything rattling around, and when I pull the recoil, I get a much stronger spark. And in the bottom of the boot seems to be where the electrode is, so I think the spark really does need to come up through this. You know, is this going to be a problem? I don't know, but I can tell you without it, it's a definite problem. So I'm going to run with it like this. Worst case, I kill something, but it doesn't run as it is, so I'm not going to spend a ton of money on this, not knowing what it does or doesn't do. So hopefully that will be enough. If anyone knows what it is or where I can get another one, please let me know in the comments. I'd like to fix the problem before it causes a problem. Okay, also this is the old recoil, and get a new recoil. They are pretty much identical. This is a Honda style, I think it's a GX 200 clone. And everything in the back pretty much is the same. The only bad thing is the new one kind of came all tacoed. They just put it in an envelope and sent it. So one side was bashed in, so I had to take a hammer to it to kind of get things to true up again. Anyway, this one does work fine, and since you don't see it, only the handle sticks out, then I really don't care. So I think one thing I am going to do though is the rope on the old one is a higher quality rope, so I'm going to switch the old rope over, also the handle as well, and then just put the new recoil on with the old rope and handle. Check the spark one last time. There we go. Just wasn't grounded good. So tomorrow it's just going to be putting the case on, getting these wires plugged in, and I'm not going to tighten the clamshell up until I start it, but obviously I'll get the fuel tank back with a little bit of fuel and see what happens. Okay. Not this again. Okay, so just to recap, I did get the engine to run on starting fluid. It didn't run long enough to see if it made power, and it would only run on starting fluid. So I brought it back up on the bench. I pulled the bolt on the carburetor bowl. There was no gas in there, and despite pumping it 50 plus times, so when all else fails, read the instructions, right? And of course, right on the case, next to the primer bulb, there are instructions, and it basically says you need to have pretty much a full gas tank, or this manual pump bulb isn't going to do anything. And it didn't. So fine, my mistake. So that was one issue, but we did hear the engine run. It sounded good. When the engine shut down a few seconds later, you may have noticed there was a little bit of a pulse from the light, so that was basically the inverter powering down, so it showed signs of life, but until it's consistently on, I can't say for sure this thing is even worth saving. So, but after it ran on starting fluid, the compression release stopped working again, and I was really hoping it was the valve drag that was somehow doing it, but I was just kidding myself. I should have paid more attention to the compression release when I was in here the first few times. And looking at it now, I can see what's going on. Right now, the compression release is on. If you take a look here on the cam, actually, yeah, you can maybe see it down there. See that thing moving? That's the compression release. So that's on, off. So full compression, compression release. And it's actuated by this right here. So when the engine spins up, this moves outward due to centrifugal force. When the engine slows down, it goes back. At least it's supposed to. The problem with this is that there is a lot of play. You see that wiggle? That's what's causing the problem. When I slide it up, one side presses against the cam a little bit, and the other one is away. So you can see that gap, maybe, right there. So if I push just a little bit, it releases. So that's what's causing all the grief here right now. So I need to think about this a little bit. I'm not really sure how to get that play out of there. These are some sort of a rivet. I can't. If I could tighten that up a little, then the problem would be solved. But I can't. So I need to think about this a little bit. Potentially if I can get some sort of spacer or clip to go over there. That would give enough space, but I just don't know if it would stay on. The alternative is if I could somehow bend this a little bit, that might improve the situation. But anyway, I don't want to do anything rash, so let me sleep on it. Okay, so I did take a quick look online to see if I can get a new camshaft, and I cannot. At least not one that's meant for this engine. It's possible, I'm sure, to find one, but it's not an easily obtainable thing. So I'm going to try to fix this one, and in order to do that, I'm going to need to uninstall it. So let's get started with that, and then we'll try a few things and see if we can't get it to work right. Alright, so I just found top dead center. You can see by that mark there. Also, I lined this up with the center of that pin on the compression release. And it lines up to the center of that dot on the camshaft. So we're good. I also marked it on the magneto. Ignore that line. It's that one right there. And if you look at it from this angle, you can see, if you look at the chain, you can see the top link, a full link on each side, and then just a little bit of the next link on each side. So that's definitely centered up real good. So I think we're good to start taking this apart. All right, I'm gonna have to put you down for this. All right, tensioner's out. Fortunately, the gasket got all torn up, so I'll have to make a new one of those. All right, just a precaution. Of course, this is not the proper use for these, but all right, I might have my fix. This is not going to be the final thing I use. This is just fluoro wire. But I'm thinking if I get a little piece of copper wire, this is 22 gauge. You know, I actually might need a slightly higher gauge because you can see it actually now rotates it a little bit too far this way. But it's not perfect. But it's pretty good. And I think once this is covered in oil, pretty good might be good enough. Alright, so what I decided to go with, I know it's not that glamorous, right? But it's just a piece of, I think it's 22 gauge copper enamelized magnet wire. And I wouldn't say it's perfect. It does get stuck still occasionally, but I think it has a fighting chance now. If it does get stuck, I think I can just, bang it a little bit and it should pop out. But let me show you. So, it seems to work pretty well. I'd say it does get stuck once out of every 10 times. But I think too, once the oil's splashing around in here, it's gonna do nothing but improve, I hope. So I'm just gonna tighten this back up and put everything back together and see what we got. Okay, almost back together. I only have the fuel lines really to connect to the fuel pump and gas tank. And I did notice a new problem. And it's one I kind of noticed last time I was trying to start it, but the primer bulb had a bunch of silicone in the top corner, like a bunch of it globbed on, and it was kind of falling off. I scraped some of it off. Didn't really see a problem, but now that it's on the bench and I was putting it back together, I could see that the silicone was being used kind of as glue. And this is a retaining ring for the primer bulb. And it has a little lip right here. And that lip, when you tighten this ring down, presses against the lip that goes around here to make the seal. Anyway, that lip had basically cracked off from this retaining nut about halfway around. And, the previous owner had tried silicone, and it looked like it worked for a while, but obviously all the pumping that I did, it broke again. So I did try some JB Weld, and that failed miserably. I then resorted to super glue, and it's holding, but I don't feel good about using this. This is a pass-through for the engine vacuum, which once the generator is running, you need that engine vacuum for the fuel pump to work. And if there's a leak in the middle, it's not going to be able to pump fuel. So I'm thinking about eliminating this completely, or at least trying. And a lot of Hondas, Yamahas, actually Ryobis, none of them have the primer pump. Instead they just run a tube right from the intake to get the vacuum pulse right to the pump, and just turning the engine over with the recoil is enough to actuate the pump. And sure, maybe you have to pull it 10 or 15 times, but it should be pumping every time you do it. And eventually it will fill the bowl up. That way I know there'll be no leaks. As long as the compression release works, then that should be a viable method. Anyway, I do want to get a replacement part for this, but of course it's not available. I found one site that might get it back in stock, so I'm going to keep an eye on that. But until then, I'm going to leave this part out and at least try it. And, if I need it, I'll put it back on, but let's try it without it, because I think that would be the safer bet. Not bad. Sounds good, runs good, makes power. But I guess the big question is the compression release. Is the compression release on? Which would be great, because then I could start it again. Or is it off? Let's pull and see what happens. It's off. Nice. Sorry, it's on. The compression release is on. I can pull it, which means I can start it again. Let's try. All right, and I think that's it. Actually, when I shut it down, I could hear the compression release turning back on as the engine slowed down. So I can tell you right now that that compression release is on. Yep. So I want to say it's fixed. Who knows? It could get stuck again someday, but I've started and stopped it now a few times, and it seems to be pretty good. Obviously, I'm going to have to try it a few more times and then fully put this thing back together. And, I don't think we need the primer bulb. Most inverter generators don't have one. This one doesn't need it. You do have to make sure you have enough gas in there, probably 3/4 of a tank, to get the system primed. But once it's primed, the fuel pump should be able to pump the tank dry. And I'll test that. I'm not going to bore you guys with that, but if there's anything interesting coming out of it, I will certainly show you. But I hope this was helpful to somebody out there. It seems like there are a lot of these Fugi micro generators branded with many different brand names, and availability of parts is like non-existent. So, to get something like this working again, it would have been much easier to order a couple replacement parts. But that's what happens. You save $400 or $500 getting something that's comparable to a $1,000 Honda, and it's not a bad generator. But a Honda brakes, you can get anything for that machine, for a Honda, for a Yamaha, and that's what you're paying for. That and the quality, but you can keep them going because they support their products. Something like this, it's a beautiful generator, but, I'd be horrified if I owned one of these and the bulb broke, and, there's probably a lot of people that have no idea what to do, so they just throw it away. Anyway, I'm rambling on. Thanks for watching.